The Wonderful Wizard of Oz was written by L. Frank Baum around the turn of the 19th century. He quickly became known as one of the most famous writers of American fiction, and certainly one of the most popular writers of children's literature. But much of what Baum contributed to the world of Oz is now forgotten. Hello, my name is Cody Goggin, and I'd like to invite you on a trip down the Yellow Brick Road as we explore the history and the writing of not just The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, but all 15 of the Oz books written by Baum in the early 1900s. Welcome to the Royal Historian of Oz. Lyman Frank Baum was born on May 15, 1856 in Chittenango, New York, to a wealthy Methodist family. His father, Benjamin Ward Baum, had been fortunate in several business ventures, including barrel making, real estate, and oil drilling. Lyman was the seventh of 9 children and named for his father's brother. He disliked the name Lyman, however, and often went by his middle name, Frank. Young Frank grew up on a property near his birthplace known as Rose Lawn, and he later fondly remembered it as a sort of paradise. He later spent time in a military academy, but after being severely reprimanded for having been caught daydreaming, it was thought that the young boy may have suffered a heart attack, and he was swiftly sent home. Due to having been a sickly child, Benjamin Baum often indulged his son's hobbies in ways that included buying him a small printing press, which spawned young Frank to taking up writing at an early age. Another of Frank's hobbies included rearing chickens, and soon he would combine his pastimes into what would become various magazines and periodicals that the young Baum would publish. This includes a stamp directory shown here, which was printed when Frank was just 17 years old. His first published book would be The Book of the Hamburgs, which covers the raising of the Hamburg chickens that he had spent time with and learned much about. Baum's work in the nonfiction genre didn't last long after the publication of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. His imagination and daydreaming would soon come in handy. Frank's first love and vocational desire was actually to work in theater. Indeed, he acted and wrote many plays to be produced at a theater built for him by his father Benjamin in New York. The most famous of these plays is The Maid of Erin. Unfortunately, many of the scripts and relics from this period of time were destroyed when the theater was brought down by a fire, ironically, during production of another of Baum's plays, entitled Matches. This was around 1882. Baum's acting career and pursuit of the theater would arguably never recover. It was also around this time, at an 1881 Christmas party, that Frank met Maud Gage. Frank's cousin Josie introduced them, saying, "Frank, I want you to know Maud Gage. I'm sure you will love her." To which Frank replied, "Miss Gage, consider yourself loved." Maud smiled at this and told him that he had better mean to live up to such a promise. They were married in November of 1882. This had initially been against the wishes of Maud's mother, noted feminist and suffragist Matilda Gage, who deemed Frank as a dreamer who would never have the means to support a family. She worried that Maud would be giving up her chance at an education at Cornell University and a career beyond that. But Maud was determined, and her mother eventually came around. Originally living together in New York while Baum was still working on his plays, the couple had a passionate relationship in which Frank often subverted control of the household to his wife. She often handled the couple's finances, and after an incident involving unwanted donuts, Frank remarked that he had learned one lesson, and that's that around the house, she was the boss. Frank and Maud's first son, also named Frank, was born on December 4, 1883. Their second son, Robert Stanton, was born on February 1, 1886, and it was a troubled birth. Maud was afflicted with an abdominal condition, and she nearly died. Baum was often on the road at this time, having taken up work as a traveling salesman. When he was at home, he spent every minute with Maud. Maud had been comforted by her visits with her family who lived in South Dakota, and after Frank decided that there might be better business opportunities out west, the family decided to pack and move closer to her family in Aberdeen, South Dakota. It was here that Frank opened a small general store. However, due to his habit of allowing customers to purchase items on credit who often never paid him back, the store went out of business. It was around this time that the family's third child, Harry Neal, was born. This, combined with the closing of the general store, placed a great financial burden on the entire family. And this was compounded further with the birth of their fourth son, Kenneth Gage, on May 24, 1891. After the general store had closed, Baum took up writing for the local paper, the Aberdeen Saturday Pioneer, where he wrote the column, Our Landlady, and once wrote an ironic criticism of the treatment of Native Americans at the time by the U.S. government. Sadly, Baum's newspaper also failed in 1891. After this devastating setback, the family moved again to the Humboldt Park section of Chicago, Illinois. Baum took up a job there with the Evening Post and soon founded his own paper, The Show Window, which featured pictures and information on store window displays and merchandising. He also continued working as a traveling salesman. The Baum household in Chicago had no running water and no bathrooms. With money being tighter than ever, Maud took up teaching embroidery. In the year 1897, Frank wrote Mother Goose and Prose, and it was published by Way and Williams of Chicago. A collection of Mother Goose nursery rhymes with illustrations by Maxfield Parrish. The book was a modest success and enabled Baum to quit his job as a salesperson, which he believed was having a negative impact on his health. In the copy of the children's book that he gave to his wife Maud is the inscription that reads, "But aside from the sordid fact that I care little what the world thinks of it, the vital question is, what does my sweetheart, my wife of 15 years, think of it?" Maud would become Baum's harshest pundit and most important critic, and in this way she was also like a partner to his writing system. Frank's next book would be Father Goose, his book. This was a collection of nonsense poetry for kids. For this second work in children's fiction, Baum would enlist the illustrative talents of W. W. Denslow. The two had a powerful creative chemistry, and often changed their own works to better blend with the other's creations. When the book was eventually published by George M. Hill Company, the two men had to pay for many of the creative services and productions themselves. But it paid off. Father Goose was released just in time for the Christmas season of 1899 and went on to sell more than 75,000 copies. The artwork done by Denslow was called some of the best ever created for a children's book, and the work as a whole was even admired by the likes of Mark Twain. With the money he'd earned with Father Goose, his book, L. Frank Baum bought his family a lakeside home in Mactawa, Michigan. He named the house The Sign of the Goose and decorated it accordingly. Though the book suffers now from stereotypical representations of certain ethnic groups, the effect it had on future children's writing is palpable. During this time, Frank was often pulled away from home with work related to the release and success of his books. Maud was left at home to raise their sons alone. She was a strict mother and was known in their local community for being one to lay down the law to her children. They were often heavily scolded for misbehaving. But one evening, when Frank was fortunate enough to be at home with his family, they passed the evening away with him telling a bedtime story to his boys. It was about a cyclone that carried a young boy to an enchanted faraway land. When one of his sons asked him what the name of the faraway land was, Frank quickly darted his eyes around the room and landed on a file cabinet marked with the letters O through Z. "Oz," he said. It was this story, told to his children, that would go on to inspire and delight other children all across the world. But only thanks to the encouragement by Maud to write the story down. Thanks to her support, Frank took to writing what would ultimately become The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Inspired by the fairy tales of Hans Christian Andersen and the Brothers Grimm, and with the intention of creating a truly American fairy tale, the first of its kind, Baum wanted to craft a story in which the wonderment and joy are retained, and the heartaches and nightmares are left out. Frank also drew many inspirations from his personal life and experiences for Oz. The Yellow Brick Road may have been inspired by the yellow bricks of Peekskill, New York, where Frank had attended military school. As a child, he recalled having nightmares of being chased by a scarecrow that would vanish just before a vicious attack. This likely inspired the character of the scarecrow, and interestingly, years after his theater was burned to the ground during the production of his play, Matches, Baum's character of the scarecrow remarks that there is only one thing in the world I'm afraid of: a lighted match. The Emerald City, home to the Wizard, was said to have been based around the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. And in Dorothy, Baum may have found inspiration and realized the relatable nature of a young girl as the heroine of a children's book from Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. But the character of Dorothy goes deeper than that. In the mid-1890s, Maud's sister became pregnant and birthed a young girl. She named her Dorothy Gage. Maud visited her sister and her new daughter often, feeling as though her niece was like the daughter she had never had while she had been raising her 4 boys. But at just 5 months old, the child became deathly ill of what was termed congestion of the brain and passed away. Maud was devastated. She wrote to her sister, "Dorothy was a beautiful baby. I could have taken her for my very own and loved her devotedly." In an effort to comfort his wife, the protagonist of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz is named Dorothy Gale, and Baum dedicated the book to my good friend and comrade, my wife. Historian Sally Wagner, who discovered this connection with Dorothy Gage, told the Associated Press in 1982, "He gave Maud her Dorothy in an immortal way." For The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, Frank once again enlisted the illustrative talents of W. W. Denslow, who he had worked with previously on Father Goose. It proved to be a winning combination. The design and artwork for the book were incredibly elaborate and colorful. Aspects of what became everyone's image of Oz were even completely Denslow's creation, such as the Tin Man's hat and the faces in the gates of the Emerald City. His work was credited as being largely responsible for the eventual success of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and was often imitated by others after the book's release, but never duplicated. Much of the story remains similar to the bedtime tale that Baum had told his sons, but now, of course, the main character is a female, young Dorothy Gale, who lives on a Kansas farm with her Aunt Em and her Uncle Henry. She also has a small dog named Toto. One day, a terrible tornado sweeps through the farm, and a trapped Dorothy is carried away alone inside of the farmhouse to a faraway land known as Oz. The falling house tumbles down and kills the Wicked Witch of the East, who had terrorized the people of Munchkin Country, where Dorothy had landed. After Dorothy leaves the house, she is greeted by the Munchkins and the Good Witch of the North. The Munchkins are very grateful to be rid of the Witch of the East, and the Good Witch decides to let Dorothy have the magical silver slippers off of the dead witch's feet. She then tells Dorothy that the only way for her to return home will be to follow the Yellow Brick Road, which leads from Munchkin Country to the Emerald City. The Good Witch of the North kisses Dorothy on the forehead, giving her protection from harm, and tells her to seek out the Great Wizard of Oz. Dorothy sets out alone, but she doesn't stay that way for long. She soon meets a scarecrow and helps him down from his perch. The poor scarecrow declares that he doesn't have a brain, but he badly wants one. Dorothy asks the scarecrow to join her on the trip to the Emerald City, Later, the two of them meet the Tin Woodman, who has been rusted in place after a curse caused his limbs to fall off, and he was replaced with tin. Dorothy and the Scarecrow help to re-oil the Tin Woodman, and after he tells them how he longs to have a real beating heart, they invite him to follow them to meet the wizard. Finally, the three travelers meet the Cowardly Lion, who is ashamed of his lack of bravery. And again, they ask him to join them on the yellow brick road. The travelers all arrive at the Emerald City and are greeted by the guardian of the gates. Before they can enter, they are required to wear green-tinted glasses, supposedly to shield their eyes from the brilliance of the city's glow. Upon meeting the wizard, they are asked in separately. To Dorothy, he appears as a giant floating head. To the Scarecrow, the wizard appears as a beautiful woman. To the Tin Woodman, a terrible beast. And to the Cowardly Lion, the wizard appears as a ball of fire. He tells them all that he will agree to help them if they band together and defeat the Wicked Witch of the West, who rules over Winky Country. Before they can leave the Emerald City on this new quest, the guardian of the gate warns them that nobody has ever managed to defeat the witch. From afar, the Wicked Witch of the West sees the group approaching through her one telescopic eye and begins a series of plans to stop them. She sends wolves, but the Tin Woodman kills them. She sends crows to peck out their eyes, but the Scarecrow breaks their necks. She sends bees to sting them, but the Scarecrow uses his straw to hide the others. She then sends a dozen of her Winky slaves to attack them, but the lion stands strong and wards them off. Finally, she uses the power of her magic golden cap to send the winged monkeys to capture Dorothy, Toto, and the Cowardly Lion, unstuff the Scarecrow, and to dent the Tin Woodman. Dorothy is then made to be the witch's slave, while the witch concocts a plan to steal the silver shoes. After the witch is finally able to manipulate Dorothy into surrendering one of the shoes accidentally, Dorothy gets angry and tosses a bucket of water at the witch, and is stunned to see that the witch begins to melt completely away. The Winkies erupt in joy at finally being released from her rule, and quickly restuff the Scarecrow and fix the Tin Woodman. They then request that the Woodman be their new ruler, and he agrees, but only on the condition that he gets to continue helping Dorothy get back to Kansas first. Dorothy then uses the magic cap to summon the winged monkeys, and they agree to fly the group of friends back to the Emerald City. But they are only bound to answer Dorothy's call through the cap 2 more times before their binding spell is broken. Dorothy and the trio of others arrive at the Emerald City to meet with the wizard once again. But before they can, Toto knocks over a screen in the throne room of Oz that reveals the real wizard. It turns out that he is a humbug, a small old man who came to Oz by hot air balloon by mistake from Omaha, Nebraska. He gives to the Scarecrow pins and needles to fill up his head, the Tin Woodman a silk heart filled with sawdust, and then gives the lion a potion bottle full of what he calls courage. It is their faith in his power that seems to give these items real magic, even if the wizard is not really a wizard. He then appoints the Scarecrow the new ruler of the Emerald City, and decides to return home by way of his balloon. The Scarecrow agrees, but only after helping Dorothy get back to Kansas first. It is also revealed that the glasses that they had been made to wear while in the Emerald City were actually worn to fool everyone into thinking it was actually a city made of emeralds. As the wizard is leaving, the ropes on his balloon snap, and he floats away. He explains that he cannot return to the ground because he doesn't know how the balloon operates. Dorothy is left behind in Oz. She summons the flying monkeys and begs them to fly her home, but they explain that they are not capable of flying over the sands that surround Oz. But a soldier with green whiskers tells Dorothy that Glinda, the Good Witch of the South, may be able to help her. So the group begins another new journey to see Glinda in her home country of the Quadlings. On their travels, the Cowardly Lion defeats a giant spider that had been terrorizing the forest, and the creatures that live there ask him to be their new leader. He agrees, but only after he can help Dorothy get back to Kansas. Dorothy uses the cap one more time to summon the flying monkeys, and they all arrive safely at Glinda's castle. Upon meeting Glinda, she reveals to Dorothy that the silver slippers have been the answer all along, and they contain the power to send her home. The Cowardly Lion, the Tin Woodman, and the Scarecrow are all returned to their new homes by the monkeys, who are then released from their bond and freed. Finally, Dorothy clicks her heels 3 times and gathers Toto in her arms. She makes a wish to return home and is suddenly flying in the air and back on the ground of Kansas. She exclaims, "I'm so glad to be home again." When the book was finished, it was published by George M. Hill Company. The copyright was registered in August, and the first edition run of 10,000 copies hit full distribution on the store shelves by September of 1900. Baum assembled the first copy himself and gave it to his sister. By October, the first editions had sold out, and the second editions, numbering 15,000, had also been depleted. Critics loved the book too. The New York Times said, "Indeed, it would be strange if there's a normal child who will not enjoy this story," and that the result has been a book that rises far above the average children's book of the day. Many years later, the Library of Congress would call The Wonderful Wizard of Oz America's greatest and best-loved homegrown fairy tale. When Maud sent Frank to fetch the check he was due for his royalties on the book just before the Christmas season, she was expecting him to return with around $100, and was so shocked when he revealed it to be $3,432 that she left the hot iron on Frank's shirt and burned it. With the success of the book came the demand for a stage play, and Baum was glad to oblige. With help from Glenn McDonough as joke writer, and with music that has sadly been lost to time, written by Paul Tians, Baum soon produced the book for the stage musical version of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. W. W. Denslow would go on to help as costume and set designer for the play. It would open at the Chicago Grand Opera House, under the direction of famed director Julian Mitchell. Mitchell did not like the initial play by Frank, and made many changes, which made Baum uneasy. But he trusted the veteran director, and went along with the planned alterations. The Wicked Witch of the West was removed completely. The Cowardly Lion's role was reduced. Toto was changed into a cow with a different name. The animal characters in the play did not speak. The other witches had names changed, and their roles were altered. New characters were added. Entire plot lines were diverted and subverted. Snow was introduced as a way to wake the characters from their sleep in the poppy field. Baum's uneasiness went public before the play opened, and made a small wave in the news, but he eventually conceded that most authors are disappointed in adaptations of their work, in some small way or another. The casting of the original production included Anna Laughlin as Dorothy Gale, Fred Stone as the Scarecrow, David C. Montgomery as Nick Chopper, a name given to the Tin Man, and Arthur Hill as the Cowardly Lion. It featured many traditional vaudeville and pantomime scenarios. This cast, combined with the music and whimsy of Oz, would make the stage play a roaring success. The original production ran for 293 performances, and the musical has been reproduced over the years by various troupes. With the fantastic performances of both the book and stage play versions of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, L. Frank Baum had made himself something of a household name in America. And after years of failures and doubt, he had financial security for his family. Years of writing for newspapers and nonfiction while sweating away as a traveling salesman were over, and it was children's books that had lifted Baum out of poverty. After a long marriage to a woman whose mother thought Frank would never amount to anything, Baum was a worldwide success story. At the time, he was 44 years old. Next time on The Royal Historian of Oz. With the success of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, millions of children begin sending fan mail to Baum demanding for a sequel. But initially, he decides to go in another direction and writes a different children's book, enlisting the help of W. W. Denslow as illustrator. But with the pressures of financial gain and legions of children's fan mail, will Baum return to Oz? Tune in next time.